Hey, welcome to So Awkward. It's me, Don, and I'm here with the first installment of what I'm calling WrestleMania Wednesday, where for some reason I'm decided I'm going to rewatch and review every WrestleMania for the past 32 years. We'll see.
You're watching So Awkward. This is Freddy Krueger saying hi!
I guess I wanted to start off by just explaining who I am as a wrestling fan. I'm Don, and I'm a lifelong wrestling fan. I grew up in a family where my dad and my older brother loved wrestling, so I grew up as a baby with wrestling on the TV. I don't know who was the champion, maybe Bob Backlund, who coincidentally lived in the town where I grew up, Glastonbury, Connecticut. He was my brother's wrestling coach. This was later on, after he had left the business, but before he became back to the business. So I watched wrestling up from when I was a baby up until probably college. You know, had to read and study and go to class and couldn't afford cable, so I didn't watch any wrestling for a 10-year period. And then when I was an adult, I had a roommate who loved wrestling, and so I would watch, I guess, Raw with her, and I got back into it. I don't remember, it was probably 2008, 7, 8, somewhere around there. I remember her favorite wrestler was a guy named John Cena, and I remember thinking to myself, who is this douchebag? I have since come around and I'm a John Cena fan, but at the time, he was a douchebag. His gimmick was Mark Wahlberg, if he was a wrestler. And I kind of lost track of wrestling again, but the past couple years I've been back into it, and I've watched the past couple WrestleManias, and I just watched the most recent WrestleMania. And as a fan, I should say I love wrestling. I'm a mark, as they say, which is opposed to a smark, which is somebody who knows it's fake and kind of analyzes everything. I don't analyze anything, I just watch it for fun. I pretend I'm watching a TV show or a movie or a sporting event. I know it's fake. That is to say, I know the outcomes are predetermined, but I know that these people are incredible athletes. I don't necessarily watch it for the storylines because I don't have cable, so I don't watch Raw or SmackDown. But I try to follow it, but basically I watch the pay-per-views every month. I'm kind of like the Christian who goes to church on Easter and Christmas and Ash Wednesday or whatever, but not every Sunday. I can't watch it every Monday. Sorry. I just like watching wrestling. I think it's fun. I felt like I should explain where I'm coming from. So when I give my opinions on all 32 or whatever WrestleManias, I'm coming from the point of a fan who's viewing it as entertainment. I'm not going to second guess the bookers. I'll give critiques and I'll complain when a match is bad or when things are weird, but for the most part, I'm not a smark. Whatever that is. Anyway, WrestleMania 1. Yeah, I took notes, which is weird. March 31st, 1985. To set the scene, I was 8 years old. No, I was 7 years old because my birthday's in April. So I was 7 years old, about to turn 8 in another month. I didn't watch it at the time, even though this was the prime of my life as a wrestling fan. But pay-per-view wasn't like a thing at that point in my life. But I didn't watch it live, but I watched like a rerun or whatever, or on video, if you know what video is. So I have memories of some of it, but not of all of it. So rewatching it was kind of surreal, but fun. I don't think I've rewatched the first WrestleMania in at least 20 years. Possibly 30 years. I don't even remember. The announcers were Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse Ventura, who, that's my childhood. My childhood was Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse Ventura. My mid-adulthood, it was Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby the Brain Heenan, but I imagine we'll get to that at some point. But at this point, it's Jesse Ventura, who, coincidentally or not, was governor of the state where I now live, Minnesota, even though at the time of the first WrestleMania, I lived in Connecticut, which is where I was born, and which is where WrestleMania was born, Stamford, Connecticut. I used to live a couple blocks from WWF headquarters. Never got in there, but I remember seeing the building. Every sporting event starts with the national anthem, and WrestleMania was presented as a major sporting event. The national anthem was sung by announcer Mean Gene Okerlund. Weird. First match on the docket was Tito Santana versus the Executioner. Tito Santana, I remember well. The Executioner, I have no memory of. This was a pretty good match. I'm not really going to review the matches or give them like ratings. I'll say if they were good, bad, boring, weird. This was a classic old school wrestling match. It got you into WrestleMania. It was, I mean, it'll go down in history as the first ever match on WrestleMania. And I guess that's where it belongs in WrestleMania history. It was okay. It was okay. After that, we went right into King Kong Bundy versus SD Jones, Special Delivery Jones. This match I remember. I remember it because it was about 10 seconds long. Special Delivery Jones, who's no pushover. He's a big, intimidating looking man. But then King Kong Bundy, who, as a kid, I remember King Kong Bundy. There was like Freddy Krueger, Jason, King Kong Bundy, my uncle. It's like the scariest people around. So the match starts, they meet, King Kong Bundy grabs him, throws him into the turnbuckle, slams into him, pins him, it's over. It was great. That's how you do the second match in WrestleMania. You have a spectacle, you have King Kong Bundy, who's a monster, come out and dominate. There was nobody in the crowd who was waiting to see SD Jones dominate. Everybody just was afraid of King Kong Bundy, and King Kong Bundy did what he does. The third match was Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Matt Bourne. I don't remember Matt Bourne. The name seems familiar. Ricky Steamboat, of course, is an icon. If I had to rank the top 10 wrestlers of all time, Steamboat would be on there. I don't know where he'd be, but he'd be on there. And this was a great match. This was a lot of fun. This was a solid match. This was maybe the best one-on-one match of the first WrestleMania. I liked it a lot. You can't go wrong with Steamboat. He's one of the all-time greats. After that, I have something here in my notes about Lord Alfred Hayes. Awful, awful, awful. After that, we had Brutus Beefcake versus David Sammartino. Brutus Beefcake, of course, I remember. David Sammartino, I don't remember. Although, of course, I remember his father, Bruno Sammartino, who is arguably the greatest champion of all time. He certainly held the belt the longest for like 8 years, I think, was his longest reign. This match was pretty good. It was a pretty good old school match. Bruno Sammartino was in the corner with his son David, and then at one point everybody just started fighting outside of the ring, and there was a double disqualification, which is fine. I don't think anybody really cared about who would win between these two, but it was a pretty fun match. After that, we had the Intercontinental belt on the line with the champion Greg the Hammer Valentine versus Junkyard Dog. This was great. This was a lot of fun. Of course, I remember both of these two. These were icons of my childhood. JYD, Greg the Hammer Valentine. It was a lot of fun. It had a kind of a weird finish, which these days in the age of the internet, I think people would complain about. But it ended with Greg the Hammer Valentine pinned JYD, but he had his legs on the ropes, which the referee didn't see, so he counted 1, 2, 3. But then Tito Santana, remember him from the first match, ran in and told the referee what had happened, so the referee reversed the decision. disqualified Greg the Hammer and gave the win to JYD. The whole thing was weird. I'm of the opinion that whatever the referee says goes, and I don't care what Tito Santana said. So anybody can just run into the ring and tell the referee he got it wrong and the referee will reverse it. That seems silly to me. If Twitter existed back then, it would have been blowing up over this decision, but everybody loves JYD, so it's okay. And it was a really fun match, and these are two old school wrestlers that, you know, are never disappointing to see in the ring. Then we had the tag team title match, which was Nikolai Volkov and Iron Sheik versus the champions, Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo. Mike Rotundo, of course, who I remember better as IRS, Irwin R. Shyster. And people today might know him as the father of wrestlers Bray Wyatt and Bo Dallas. But back then he was just Mike Rotundo. He was a pretty great wrestler. Barry Windham, of course, also a great wrestler. If I had to pick the second or third best match of the night, it was probably this one. This was just four great old school wrestlers having a great old school match. It was a lot of fun. In fact, this may even have been the best match of the night. It was just four great old school wrestlers going at it. It was a lot of fun. I liked it a lot. So the next match is a complicated one. It's Big John Studd versus Andre the Giant for, I guess, the right to be the Giant in the WWF. Big John Studd will give Andre the Giant $15,000 in cash if he can body slam him, but if Andre the Giant can't body slam him, he has to retire from professional wrestling. Obviously, Andre the Giant slams him and wins, but this is a classic match with two old school wrestlers. Andre the Giant, arguably the most famous professional wrestler of all time. Andre the Giant eventually slams him, but he doesn't keep the money. He takes the bag of money and he throws it into the crowd, but then Big John Studd's manager, Bobby the Brain Heenan, grabs the money and then runs with it backstage, probably because it's Vince McMahon's money and he doesn't really want to give it away. Then we go to the ladies championship match with, and this is an interesting one because of, at least because of the managers involved. Leilani Kai, accompanied by the Fabulous Moolah, versus Wendy Richter with Cyndi Lauper. Now, you can't emphasize how important Cyndi Lauper was, not just to WrestleMania 1, but to wrestling in general. And Cyndi Lauper represents MTV, I guess, the rock and wrestling connection. As a kid, I remember this was huge. You'd watch MTV, which was just starting at this point, and Cyndi Lauper is one of the biggest pop stars of the era. And she appeared on WWF. WWF superstars like Roddy Piper, Captain Lou, I guess Wendy Richter appeared in her videos. It was that merging of MTV, which was just becoming the most popular thing in the world, with WWF, which was also one of the most popular things in the world, and it just, WWF helped make MTV, and MTV helped make WWF, and it all coalesced at WrestleMania 1 in this match that was mediocre. This wasn't a great match. These didn't look like great athletes or great performers with great in-ring psychology or technique. But we will get to the point in the next 32 weeks where female wrestlers come into their own and become as good, and some are better than the male wrestlers. I promise you. And then we have the main event, which is a tag team match with Hulk Hogan with Mr. T versus Paul Orndorff, Mr. Wonderful, and Rowdy Roddy Piper. Three of the biggest wrestlers of the time, and one of the biggest, I guess, television stars of the time, Mr. T, who was probably famous from the A-Team. This was a pretty good match. This was a lot of fun. What kept it from being a great match was Mr. T. I love Mr. T on A-Team. It was one of my favorite shows as a kid. I love him in Rocky III, one of my favorite movies as a kid and as an adult. I wish I wasn't filming this video. I wish I was watching Rocky III right now. But as a professional wrestler, if this had been Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff and Rowdy Roddy Piper versus Hulk Hogan and Junkyard Dog, this would be the greatest match in the history of WrestleMania. It would have been so much fun with 4 icons. As it is, it's 3 icons and a celebrity they shoehorned in. I mean, I understand why they put in the celebrity. He was just one of many. They actually, when the main event started, which is when they rolled out the red carpet for a guest ring announcer, Billy Martin. Liberace was the guest bell ringer. And then guest referee was Muhammad Ali. They went all out, at least for the main event. And it was a lot of fun. It was a good match. It was fun. Even Mr. T, I mean, he tried. As somebody who is not a professional wrestler, I think Mr. T did pretty good, and he looked pretty good. Although it was kind of weird because I remember as a kid watching the A-Team in Rocky III, where Mr. T is the baddest man on the planet. He's huge. He's bigger than Hannibal and Face and Murdoch. And when he's up against Rocky, he looks, 8 feet tall. But when he's in the ring with Hulk Hogan and Rowdy Piper and Paul Orndorff, Mr. T kind of looked like a midget. Like I assume that when Vince McMahon, he looked at TV and saw like movies and who is the biggest star in the world who could potentially be a wrestler, he said, "Oh, Mr. T, let's get him." So on paper, Mr. T seemed like a logical choice to be Hulk Hogan's tag team partner, but in reality, he was tiny. He put in a pretty good effort, and it was a really fun match. So I guess I should mention that in Mr. T and Hulk Hogan's corner was Jimmy Superfly Snuka, and in the corner of Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper was Cowboy Bob Orton, who is the father of current WWE superstar Randy Orton. So at one point in the ring was Hulk Hogan, Mr. T, Jimmy Superfly Snuka, who was accompanying them, Paul Orndorff, Rowdy Piper, Cowboy Bob Orton, who was in their corner, guest referee Muhammad Ali, and the real referee Pat Patterson. So they were all in the ring. I don't know if there's ever been more star power in the ring than at that one moment in WrestleMania 1. And then they cut to Liberace and Billy Martin. How do you beat that? How do you beat star power like that? That's great fun. WrestleMania 1 might be worth watching just for that one moment. Just to see Muhammad Ali punch Rowdy Piper. I mean, that's great fun. How can you not like that? And it was a great way to end the night and the first ever WrestleMania. So yeah, that's WrestleMania 1, March 31st, 1985. That's a long time ago. I wrote down in my notes on each match ratings out of 5, but I'm not going to share them with you because that if I'm going to really review 32 WrestleManias over the course of 3 decades, like a match that they give 3 out of 5 in 1985 will have nothing to do with a match that they give a 3 out of 5 in 2012. Wrestling will change that much to make star ratings irrelevant. So basically what I'm going to do is give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I'm going to say if this event is worth rewatching or if it's worth skipping. Both from an entertainment perspective and a historical perspective. Having said that, WrestleMania 1, thumbs up. It was good fun. There were a lot of really fun matches. Some duds, but for the most part, from a historical perspective and an entertainment perspective, this delivered. At the time, I remember being a kid, and I didn't watch it live, but I watched it afterward, and I remember being transfixed. All of my favorite wrestlers were there, and they all put on a really good show. And 32 years later, it's still a pretty good show. So if the lighting and the framing seems a little off, it's because the battery in my camera died, so I had to charge it and reset everything. But anyway, let's get back into it. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody notices that. Nobody's that anal with me, right? It's funny how long it takes me to set up my camera just for a video where I'm talking about WrestleMania 1, where maybe 50 people will watch it. I'm crazy. I'm crazy.